Hello! If you are joining me, today's video is covering a total body flow that I did. I put everything at double the speed because I was moving really slow. I just started off by warming up through the shoulders and warming up my standing postural alignment. One thing that I like to do is take some really big circles with my arms and try to really challenge my range of motion. So I try to move my upper body as little as possible. This style of rotation, taking that rotation, is called CARS, controlled like complete range of motion in the joints is the goal of that. So here I'm just trying to see how far I can get my arms to move without really moving the rest of my body. A lot of stabilization through the core, a lot of stabilization in the hips to make that happen. Speaking of hips, I'm going to take it through and do some circles with my hips here. Trying to lengthen and stretch. Feel a little bit of openness. And as you're doing these circles, you can really play around with which knee you bend and how that takes the hips over to the other side. And it's really important to try to go in both directions as well. One thing that I have noticed is, especially in, letting my lifestyle become more sedentary and then bringing myself out of that, one thing I've noticed is one direction is not the same as the other. In many exercises, I get it going in one direction and it feels good, but as soon as I do the opposite direction, it feels even better. So I highly recommend doing it both ways. At this point, I'm trying to lengthen my spine and let my spine flex and bend backwards. And then I'm going to do the reverse of that with a forward fold and really sorry, I said I was flexing my spine, but here I'm extending my spine, bending it backwards, and then whenever I fold forward, I'm going to flex my spine and round it. And now I'm going to take it into a downward facing dog so that I can really open up through the back and the shoulders at the same time. And the back of the body includes the lower body as well. Downward facing dog is really great because you can get all of the posterior chain stretching from the lower part of the body. So all the way from the hips down to the ankles, you can really feel that stretch. In the top half of the body, it takes some practice, but you really can start to feel the shoulders open up across the back of the shoulders. And if downward facing dog is something that's hard for you, I invite you to spend some time in it and play around with what you feel in your hands and what you feel in your shoulders. Start off in a plank position and press yourself backward, reaching your butt up and back and trying to bring your chest through and forward towards the top of your thighs. Feel that you can rotate out through your arms. So what that's going to mean is that you'll feel some pressure on the pinky edge side of your hand, not just the thumb edge side and the pointing finger. Try to feel some weight going through the hand as you're in that downward facing dog. That external rotation that you create through the arms is going to create torque in the shoulder, increasing your stability. And you may even feel some work around the armpit, underneath the armpit. And those muscles are all there to help support the shoulders if you can connect with them and if you can learn how to engage them. So externally rotating the arms is one place to start. And it's really helpful for downward facing dog. And here I'm going into a prone press up, not upward facing dog. So I'm not pressing down into my legs. I'm actually relaxing my legs whenever I press up. It's a really good relief if you've had prolonged sitting. My body likes to flex my low back. So we have that natural curve of the low back. Humans do. We have a natural curve there. And when I sit, my inclination is to take that curve out and kind of push out against the low back, which is not a healthy seated position. So that prone press up really helps me combat the prolonged sitting that I'm finding myself doing more and more of. Which I'm also being more and more mindful of not sitting for long periods of time without getting up and moving. You know, it's okay that I'm reading a lot during the day or doing some computer work a lot during the day, but I've got to get movement in between those so that my body isn't stuck in these unhealthy positions for too long. This stretch here is one of the greatest stretches for the body. It can be done with the back knee dropped or the back knee elevated, or you can do a little bit of both. I like to do each version. But do what feels better for your body at the day, at the time. When I go into these downward facing dogs and I try to open my hips like that, the one focus that I'm trying to have is I'm trying not to turn with my shoulders. I'm going to try to keep my shoulders in alignment, and I'm going to feel that one side is taking more weight than the other because I'm in a 3-point position with only 3 parts of my body on the ground. But I don't want to twist my shoulders and turn my shoulders whenever I bring that leg up. So I'm trying to keep myself facing the same direction, even though I'm taking more weight on one side. Opening the hips, still trying to keep that shoulder down. And then stepping it through. This rotation here with the hand towards the ceiling can go the opposite way. That same hand can dip down and rotate underneath the opposite armpit, and you can twist in the other direction. It feels nice for the hips. You can feel it both ways. Taking it in for a little bit of cat-cow here. Just keep that spinal mobility and stability going. Seeing how far I can flex and extend the spine into those cat-cows. After that, I flipped myself over, took it in for some glute bridges. When I'm training clients, I like to give a separate name to the glute bridge specifically, because many of us practice yoga, and when you're going into a bridge in yoga, you can really extend the top part of the spine too and start to lift the chest up off of the floor and get the chin close to the chest. But for this purpose here, just focusing on hip stability, I like to leave my shoulders nice and flat on the ground, and I only come up off the ground until I feel that my hips are extended in the front. Today I put my focus on stability, so this video is at double speed. It's twice the original. So I really was holding these postures for an extended amount of time, trying to hold the posture as long as I could and really feel that work for a longer time and work on the endurance that I have at the stability of this as well. How long can I remain stable in this posture? And that's what my focus was this morning. And this here with the little hip circles that I did and the bridge, I went through 2 rounds of that. 2 rounds from the hip circles to the bridge, giving some rotation with the circles, getting some side to side movement, left to right. And then with the bridge, really focusing on that front to back stability, being able to pull my hips through to extended so that they're very straight in the front, this minimal rotation as possible. That's what my focus here was. So I put those 2 together so I could get as much rotation as possible and as little rotation as possible, and working on my stability between the 2 that way. Here, going in for that second round of the hip circles. Diamond always right there by my side, making sure I have plenty of emotional support. And then after the hip circles, I brought it back in for bridge. And then after bridge, I went to my shoulders. I'm imbalanced from right to left side. I feel a lot of tension in the back of my right shoulder, surrounding the shoulder blades. And that shoulder also droops lower than the left shoulder. So here I was just trying to relieve some of that tension that I was feeling. And I used the yoga block to do this, just bringing the edge of the block a little bit more onto the right hand side there. Trying to use the tools that I've got to the best that I can. Another thing I like to do is after I've worked on that hip stability, I like to put it together for when I'm moving. You know, it's really easy to become stable in these still and limited range of motion positions that we can put ourselves in. You know, in a bridge, there's only so far you can go. But when you're standing and walking, it's really different. And oftentimes we don't put that together. We don't put that stability that we used on the ground into our standing positions. So today, when I recorded this, I was really trying to put those together, put a link between my hip stability lying down and my hip stability standing up and moving. And here I'm just working on strength for the feet. Can my feet handle being in this extended position? You know, can I press up through my toes and have my feet help me stabilize? Can they help my ankle stay stable? So that's what I was putting together here. That's why I went from the circles to the bridge, a couple of rounds of those, and then into some walking. Now I'm actually going to do some stretches for my feet on the yoga block. And I don't come up with these on my own. Not everything. I don't come up with everything on my own, like the foot stretches and the foot exercises. There's an account on Instagram called My Foot Function, and I follow them and use a lot of their tips. I've even bought the programming for it, and I've done a little bit of it. I'm not good at being consistent with it, but that is something that I am going to be paying more attention to, is the strength of my feet and how well my feet can stabilize my body. If my feet are stronger, my balance is going to be better. And if my balance is better, I'm not going to have to work as hard to do some of these moves that I want to do. So I'm going to work it from the ground up. Working on ankle mobility here, full circles, each direction, each foot. Making sure that I do both sides as I'm stretching the feet out. One thing that I did learn from My Foot Function, so I'm an athlete, and I'm a pretty high level performing athlete. You know, if I get enough practice at something, I'm going to be good at it. But through My Foot Function, I realized that my feet were nowhere near the capability and strength capacity that my legs were, that my core was. And they really are the weaker link in my body. And so that's an area that I'll be paying more attention to. You know, I've been working out barefoot for the last couple of years now. Anytime I'm working out, I don't have shoes on. And that alone is really helpful, just allowing me to make sure that I can bring my toes flat and forward as opposed to pulling back and curling back. My toes often wanted to curl and pull in that way instead of being able to push down long and forward. It's a really important function of the foot that I just wasn't aware of until My Foot Function made me aware. And so I do like to put attention and focus into that part of the body now, so I can have a better overall strength instead of just coming from one part of the body or the next. Spending some time coming up onto my toes and stabilizing there with my toes long and forward. Just practicing balancing and steadying myself from this position here. It was not easy this morning. I was struggling. But the struggle is part of the process. To me, I try to approach the struggle with curiosity. Like, wow, what is making this so hard? Which part of my body is struggling to keep up with this movement? Here, I'm going to be stretching out the hip area, upper thigh, trying to get both sides of it. So that first one that I did, internal rotation, and this one here with the knee coming out is external rotation. And by bringing my foot that was on the ground off of the ground and bringing that leg closer to me, I'm going to intensify the stretch that I'm going to feel here. Now I'm going back for internal rotation. So I'm bringing the inside of the knee down and forward towards the floor. And now I'm going to bring the outside of the knee down and towards the floor. And that'll bring me my external rotation. Both internal and external rotation are extremely important for the legs. Many times, with the way that our lifestyles are, we become good at one versus the other instead of both. So when I'm training, I really like to train both, and I try to explore which one is stronger than the other. Which one am I more capable in? And whenever I've found that, I try to give myself a little extra attention to the one that I'm not so capable in. If I feel like it's weaker, I'm going to give it a little extra time there. And now here what I'm doing, it's called flossing. It's a version of flossing to make sure that the legs are used to coming in and out of a healthy posture and just getting the nerves in the leg to be able to line up in that place. Putting a little drag with my foot at the bottom just to get a little more engagement in the back of the leg. Doing all of that on the other leg. I switched angles on this just so you could see from both sides. There's always something a little different to notice whenever you get to see it from the other side. And again here, this is the internal rotation. The inside of my knee is coming down and towards the ground. Giving it a good stretch here. I'm doing this passively, trying to be passive, not forcing anything. One side of my body always feels different than the other. So oftentimes I may spend more time in the opposite position for each side. I try to just listen to where I'm at for the day and go from there. Breathing as I'm doing it. You can really allow the exhale to help the body relax. If you've ever had a yoga instructor that says, use your inhale to set and use your exhale to deepen it, to relax further into it. There's even a science behind that. I just read the book, The Polyvagal Theory, about psychology and the vagal nerve and the ventral vagal complex. And the takeaway from that for me was how effective breathing is for the entire system of the body. With the exhale, you're stimulating the vagal nerve, and that nerve is kind of like a pacemaker to the heart, in that when you can get into that ventral vagal complex, breathing out can bring the heart rate down. It really can calm the body. You know, and in yoga practices, they've known this for a long time. They may not have known how to scientifically tell you what was going on, but, you know, it had been observed that through exhaling, you can relax the body. And now we're getting, you know, some answers as to why that is. Western medicine is behind many of the older studies, in that they haven't taken the time to find the correlation in many of these things. And so now we're getting to a point where studies are catching up to that. And we're seeing, you know, in the Western medicine and psychology, we're seeing a lot of these, we're seeing a lot of methods that have been used for a long time. Now people are saying, oh, okay, it's true. It is true, and here's why. So I think that's really cool. Just knowing that these physical and spiritual practices that have been around, they still ring true, even with modern medicine catching up and saying, oh, well, we're going to break it down and see if this is true. It is. Surprise. Or not. So now what I'm going to finish off with is some work for the hip flexors. You can use anything to put out in front of you. I chose the yoga block because my range of motion is good enough. My hip flexors are strong enough to raise my leg. Now, I have a tendency to use my external hip flexors, which is like your TFL, if you're familiar with that. And I really want to be able to get more into the psoas. So a lot of times, you know, we might even have a tight psoas, but it's still weak. So here I'm just trying to gently engage these muscles, no added resistance, just taking my time and putting some intention behind it. So I'm bringing my leg up and over towards the middle, and that'll help me engage those muscles towards the middle instead of the outside. And that was all I did for this one. I hope you have a great day. Thanks for joining me.